My name is Stephen Thaxter-Swallow, and I was born in Charleston, South Carolina, April 11th, 1947.
And did you grow up there?
I did not. I lived there until I was about 5.5 years old, and then my daddy got transferred up to New York City, and we lived in northern New Jersey after that, where my formative years really were, in Plainfield, New Jersey.
What did your father do for work?
He was an engineer for Johns Manville Corporation. We were, and before that, he worked for the West Virginia Pulp and Paper Company, which is a large, paper company, obviously, in Charleston. And so that was a career change for him, or a company change. And Johns Manville hired him, and he was working out of the New York office. And,
What schools did you attend growing up and into college?
I almost graduated from Plainfield High School after going from kindergarten through high school, through my junior year of high school. And then being the oldest of 5 children, we all got a little bit of a surprise when Dad came home from New York and said, we're moving to Emporia, Virginia, on the North Carolina border. I can kind of remember not having to think about where that might be.
You talked about what did your mother do for work?
My mother raised 5 children. She was very, very talented artist and interior decorator. Her biggest problem moving to Virginia was leaving her sister. They're just Ernie and Anita. There's the 2 of them, and they did some interior decorating together, along with they were really good. Yeah.
What did you do before you decided to enlist? What did you do before you joined the military?
Oh, well, I have a little story. I was already in dental school. It was my freshman year in 1969. I had graduated from Greensville County High School in Emporia because I spent my last year and a half there. Went on to the University of Richmond because they had a really good acceptance rate. I wanted to be a Tar Heel. I remember I wanted to go to the University of North Carolina, but my dad came back and said, you know, the president of Johns Manville went to the University of Richmond. I'd never heard of it. And it just received an award for the most beautiful campus of a university of its size in the United States. So Dad says, well, why don't you come look at it? And oh my God, it deserved that award. It's gorgeous. And if you know its reputation now, I get a lot more mileage out of it. It's now called the Little Harvard of the South, and it's really quite a school these days. But I was very fortunate to go there and went straight to the Medical College of Virginia Dental School from there. Yeah.
Why did you decide to join the military?
That's the story. In 1969, the federal government decided that too many of underprivileged people were going to Vietnam, and us college graduates and were getting away. So they had a drawing, which was, I remember, televised live. I didn't watch it. Of all, they had a big barrel of all 365 dates, and they drew them out one at a time. And my April 11th came out number 14. And when I read that in the paper the next morning, I was in the dorm. We had to stay in the dorm if we weren't married at MCV, Medical College of Virginia, at the time. And I saw the number 14 and said to myself, well, I guess I'm going in the military. And I also said to myself, so I got to figure out how I can get into the Navy as quickly as possible, because going into the military wasn't anything that I was looking to do. But it didn't upset me, even with the Vietnam War going on and knowing that they could send me over there. It didn't upset me, but I had this, I had to go into the Navy. So I brought this picture for you guys, if you could focus in on it. This is in the Pacific right when World War II started. And this is my father and his two brothers, Ken and Brud. And they were all in the Pacific, and they all survived. My dad was, all three of them. Brud worked with Pratt and Whitney, but not then. He was one of their most important people because when they installed a new engine for real into a military plane, he was the first one to go up with it. They needed him to. And my father graduated number 2 at Cornell. They'd all were out of college when they enlisted. They just, I was very proud of them, and we were a Navy family. So then the story really starts because I got on the phone in Richmond, Virginia, where MCV is, and told them that I just won a lottery. Only time I ever won a lottery. And that I'm in dental school here, and I'd really like to take the necessary steps to become I don't know if I said officer, Navy officer. I probably understood medical officers were, and they said, oh well, it doesn't quite work like that. You either have to get drafted or something. And he said, but we have a very special program in the 5th Naval District, which is the biggest Navy district in the country. It has Norfolk and all the shipyards and so forth. And so they said, but the problem is we're looking for some really outstanding dentists, and it's a difficult program to get into, and we only take 6, and we've already taken 6. And I went, well, thank you for telling me all of that, And he said, no, we really want you to apply because the 6 people we've accepted have applied to other top-notch programs, and we won't be able to keep all of them, so we would like you to. And I have to say, I applied to college and got in. I applied to dental school and I got in. And the only thing that was more difficult than getting into that program was when I became board certified in implant dentistry, and I was in my early 50s then. Okay, so they ran me through. They wanted everything I ever did in my life. They made me write essays. They made me take tests, and I took it very, very seriously because I was a good student. I didn't want to miss any class for anything, but I did for them, and so I did, and ended up just what they said. A couple of spots opened up, and I got accepted and put in there. And it was a very good experience. They wanted me to finish dental school, so they weren't going to bother me at all, even with the war raging. They sent me a letter sophomore, junior year, saying that I was promoted from ensign to Lieutenant JG. They made me an ensign right away, and then senior year, they started sending checks that wouldn't sound like big amounts of money now, but they were huge to us then. And I got the first one. I said, why are they sending me money? And when the second one came, I said, I better call. And I called and said, listen, I just got a check for like $250, which was a huge amount of money then. Oh yeah, Dr. Swallow, yes, you did. We had some extra money in the budget in your program, and we thought you 6 guys could really use it. And they kept sending it until I graduated. And during dental school, they sent me to yes they did, but they sent me to a clerkship at Portsmouth Navy Hospital, Portsmouth, Virginia. And they put me in 16 weeks through 8 services. I went through everything from OB/GYN to ENT to medical services. I went through all of it. And the Navy, they were a huge impact on me because they wanted me to be one of the team, no matter what I was doing. If we were doing a radical neck, which is where you're taking the person completely apart to remove cancers and things like that, I scrubbed in with them, and they had me working. If we were doing a cesarean section, I would lift the baby out or do the. It was that serious, and they really wanted me. I was taking people's tonsils out, for heaven's sakes. Nothing I ever thought I would do. I went to dental school. Remember, dental school. But in fact, we were walking over to OBGYN, and another officer named Wayne, who was doing the clerkship, got accosted by this man while I ran for a real doctor, and he delivered a baby in the parking lot. After that was between my sophomore and junior years. Between my junior and senior years, I went to officer indoctrination school for the entire summer in Newport, Rhode Island. And they were very serious about that, although I had a little bit too much fun. It was very nice. That was a whole summer where they really wanted us to understand the Navy and understand what an officer was and what a ship was, and they had the chiefs in there having fun with us, where we were in a sinking ship, and the room was flooding, and we were holding the pipes at the top, trying to get a breath of air that was at the top. But the chiefs had fun with us young pups that really were about to be made, or were officers, but didn't understand the things that they did. So, and then I graduated from dental school, and they offered me some options, and one of them was to be a Navy dentist at the Portsmouth Navy Shipyard. I chose that place in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, which is really in Kittery, Maine. And I chose it because Casey had been accepted in a PhD program at MIT, and I just thought that was the coolest thing since sliced bread, that she had that kind of an opportunity. So it worked for both of us. So we moved to Newburyport, and I went up to the shipyard, and she went into Cambridge. Officer indoctrination school was basic training for somebody like me.
Where did you meet Casey?
I met her in college, actually before University of Richmond. The girls, the ladies is West Hampton College, which is University of Richmond has Richmond College, and West Hampton College still does.
You kind of answered a bunch of them. What was your first duty station? What was your specialization? How long did you serve in the Navy?
Active duty, maybe 3 years when you count the 2 years of active duty at the Portsmouth Navy Shipyard, along with the clerkships and the Navy to me was just a privilege while I was doing it, because they absolutely encouraged me to keep going with continuing education, where I didn't, if you'd asked me ahead of time, I said, well, the military probably has some pretty good stuff, but I could go to Bethesda anytime I wanted to, and they would absolutely give me the leave and fly me down there and put me up, and it was just, I continued with that most of my education since dental school anyhow, so I never stopped. Then when I after the first year in the Navy, I had visions of starting a private practice while I was still in the Navy, which was completely illegal in the Army or the Air Force, but it was legal in the Navy with the approval of your commanding officer. And I asked the dental officer I worked for, who was a captain, and the commander of the yard, who was an admiral, and they said, well, yeah, we think you should do that. And I started a little office outside the gate and worked 3 nights a week. I saluted the Marine and went right in and unbuttoned my shirt. But what it evolved in is the second commander of the shipyard sent his 7 daughters to me, and the commander of the shipyard, and I had aspirations of being a prosthodontist, just doing full constructions, and the Navy was such an incredible boost to my career. I can't even tell you, because they not only allowed me to be full year into private practice when I got out of the Navy, which was a difficult thing to do, by the way, and I'm going to tell you why I said that, because I liked the Navy so much that I was actually, before I did that, willing to extend, but I wanted to stay at the Portsmouth Navy shipyard because Casey was doing very well in her PhD program at MIT, and I didn't want to get shipped off somewhere, and but they granted me the extension, but wanted me to go on a ship, and I said, I don't even mind that, but I can't do that right now, and so when it was time for me to get out of the Navy, I don't know, it was a clerical something, but they had me as not getting out, and didn't want to let me out. And were ready to put me on a ship, but anyhow, that got straightened out. But as soon as I went into my regular practice, both my dental officer, Captain Bassett, who was the man, he wasn't my boss. You would have thought. He ran the clinic, and there were 3 junior officers that worked for him, along with a huge staff. But he sent his wife for a full mouth reconstruction from me, and then the commander of the shipyard did the same thing, and it really it was great. And the other officers on the Navy Yard I knew, because I'm kind of a social person, and I got invited to so I knew these people, and they all came over, and it couldn't have been a nicer start to the kind of practice that I wanted to have, and they never stopped helping me. We were colleagues and friends, and so I got out of the Navy in the mid-'80s somewhere, because again, I liked the Navy so much, I wanted to go on active reserves, but I became more and more entrenched in everything from Rotary Club to study clubs, and so I never actually filled out their 100-page form, and to get into the active reserves. Plus, my time was like, how do you do that? And I remember coming home from skiing with Casey and Lindsay and Clint. Now we were coming home from Sugarloaf, and I opened my mailbox, and there was an honorable discharge from the Navy. So that was in the mid-'80s sometime. I think they got tired of waiting for me to, because I would always say, oh no, I'm going to do that, but they got tired of waiting. Anyway, my Navy career was, for just really a 2-year obligation after dental school, was really. It was a great experience. Never stopped being. Many of my best friends are still from that experience.
What rank were you when you were discharged?
Excuse me?
What rank were you when you were discharged?
I was a full lieutenant, and when I went in, I was a full lieutenant. So there was just the 2 years of active duty. I maybe shouldn't say this, but they really said that if you did find a way to stay, you could be a lieutenant commander, and I was very, very, very young to get that. But now I already mentioned that I had the little practice, and I couldn't stay in even with that. So.
Do you still keep in touch with any friends you made there, or attend any reunion events?
I'm going to say no, and I did forever, but they started dying on me, I didn't like that. And I remember we went to Marquette, Michigan, and I looked for Kipka, and there was a Kipka there, and I'd never been to Marquette. It's up on Lake Superior. And I thought it might be Bud Kipka, who was one of the 3 junior officers, with me. on the Navy shipyard, but no, he apparently retired and was gone. I couldn't find him. But
When did you move to West Newbury?
moved to West Newbury in 1974 from Newburyport. We moved. We wanted to own a house. I was still very much in the Navy, and we found a house on Robin Road. There's a dentist named McGar who lived on Crane Neck Street, right on the corner there, and we were kind of friends, and that's why I was aware of the development going through there. And yeah, we ended up buying there, and it took me a while to really find my way around West Newbury, but when Casey was more aware than I was, and she said, River Road is really beautiful, and there's a house with a sign on it, and we ended up buying it very early in '77. And we've lived in the same house for 47 years. Yeah. I am such a Navy person that if they ask me which branch should I go in, I would recommend the Navy from my experience, but it's been a long time since I got out in the mid-'80s, so yeah, I had some really cool experiences. One was there was a Navy League dinner. This was after I got out, and Captain McDonough was still the commander of the yard, and asked me would I buy a table, and I said, well, a seat for my wife and I said, no, I'd like to buy a whole table. And he said, you what? And I think I was the Rotary, I know I was the Rotary Club president at the time in Kittery, and I wanted to be able to invite, colleagues, and I did, and all the senators and congressmen from New England were there, along with the Secretary of the Navy and the Undersecretary of the Navy. Although a couple of them were called away, they had some emergency, but most of them were there. The Secretary of the Navy is one that got called away, but they were talking about christening the USS Maine in Kittery rather than Portland, and Portland was the obvious place because it was easy to sail. Those ships were so big, almost 700 feet long, and they drafted a lot of water, and to get it into the Portsmouth Harbor was very, very, very difficult. And so it came down to Portland and Kittery, and the Undersecretary of the Navy sat down with me, and along with a couple of senators, and said, well, Dr. Swallow, we want to ask you what you think. And I said, well, they've been talking about closing the shipyard here, which is a little bit upsetting to a lot of people, and they just closed the Strategic Air Command base of Pease, and that Kittery in Portsmouth actually suffered a recession, even though it was the waterfront property. Dover was growing way faster. And I said, it was at the time where I said that it would be a real lift here. Now that we just found out the shipyard's going to stay open, because it was the most efficient shipyard in the United States of America, and Captain McDonough proved it. He proved it. He went before Congress live. He was right there, and he proved it. And they were already on the list for closure, and once you hit that list, you were going to close. But they reversed it, and it's the oldest shipyard in the United States, too. And anyway, I was proud to be attached to that particular shipyard, especially after I figured out what was going on. And I really felt that they came out the very next day or the day after that and said they'd made the decision that the USS Maine was going to be christened in Kittery. And I felt like I had a lot to do with that. And it was. And also, I don't know how much time you want, but the character that was the speaker that night at that Navy League dinner was a retired captain, submarine captain. And I had gotten the present commander of the shipyard into Rotary Club because I was current president, and I made it. My goal was to double the size of the Rotary Club because it was a little too small. It was supposed to have a minimum of 25 members, and I made a goal to myself that when I left, it had 46 members, and not just anybody. And I did that in my professional career too. And I got I'm trying to remember his name, the current commander as a member, and a lot of other people. Gary Adams owned the Trading Post, and people that carried some clout around town. And so we had a real Rotary Club going by then. And I'm losing my train of thought. The captain, our speaker. So at Rotary, actually the next morning, because I think this was a Monday night, and we had a breakfast meeting on Tuesday mornings, and the current commander of the shipyard, an admiral, said to me, "Stephen, do you know how he won the Congressional Medal of Honor?" I failed to mention that. He was a Navy captain, but he had the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he was wearing it. And I said, "No, sir, I have no idea how he got that." He said, "Well, he had his submarine off the southern coast of Africa during the war, and he became aware that there was a very, very, very large convoy of Japanese ships coming his way. And this guy was a salty character. Oh, I loved him. He was beyond, out of the limits of scale of being a character. And he had that microphone, and he said, well, when I knew they were coming, he said, I just got the charts out with my good guys, and we figured out where they were going to put in for the night. We knew they couldn't sail overnight. And they figured out where they were going to go. He said, so I went right up next to the rocks where their sonar couldn't find me and parked there. And he said, sure enough, we were right. They came in and they formed a circle with the carriers and the battleship inside, and then the cruisers and the heavy cruisers, then the cruisers and the escorts and destroyers, and it was huge. So he said, so I said, well, we'll wait for a while, let everybody settle in, and, they don't know we're here, they can't find us, so he waited till, I don't know, I'm making it all up now, 2 a.m, and he came out, and of course the big ships, the carrier and the battleship were right in front of him, and he said, he hit the thing for the attack, and the whole ship readied itself to attack. And he pointed to the carrier and went, fire 1, fire 2, fire all into the carrier, turned the submarine around where it was already loaded to go the other way. This is not a nuclear submarine. This is, and he turned to the battleship and he sent all the torpedoes into it. Well, that tended to wake up the Japanese, and so immediately they were charging in to see what had happened, and he had his guys loading up all his torpedoes again. He said, we're not wasting any time here. He didn't go anywhere. He just loaded it all up again. And so he said, well, there was a problem because there was a reef around this cove, that they were in a big reef, and there was only one place that was deep enough for his submarine to go in. And he said he certainly knew well that the Japanese knew that. So he dove under the ships, the carrier and the battleship, and headed sort of toward the one place. And the depth charges started coming like crazy. But he was zigzagging according to the protocols to miss as many of those as he could. And then he knew that there was no possible way for him to get through, because he would have been blown apart. So he said to his executive officer and to himself, he says, what's the last thing they think I would do? And he said, well, obviously that's to dive down under and go right back to where I was, under all the burning ships, under everything, And that's exactly what he did. He went back right to where he was in the beginning when he hit him. And he turned and he raised his ship up, and now all the cruisers, everything were in there, and they were having, and he pushed the attack button again, and everybody got into their battle stations, and he hit him again from both sides of his submarine. He hit them all. And he said he had placed in such chaos that he immediately dove before they could think about it, while he was practically still firing, and they headed out, and they got out. And he got the Congressional Medal of Honor for doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all
Can you guys tell that I like the Navy?
I kind of think so.
Yeah, we did.
But it's killing me what the commander at Rotary Club, what's his name? He was such a cool guy, too. And I can't remember his name right now. But I had a stroke 4 weeks ago, Bob knows, so I'll use that for an excuse. Yeah. I came out pretty good.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Swallow, for doing this.
Well, I'd like to thank Bob Janes for doing this, and it's a real privilege to have somebody like him in our town that takes all this very seriously, because it is. And I know that our Congressman Seth Moulton is a veteran, and he was on CNN this past Monday, almost shocking me with what he was saying, but I very much enjoyed what he was saying. And I'd like to pay tribute to our congressman here, and hope he's our next president of the United States, because he'd be a good one.